So welcome back to Marketing Data 101, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about marketing data reporting automation. You can see the beautiful new PowerPoint template here as well. I'm going to play a bit more of an active role in this one than normal. So I'm going to take you through some ideas in relation to automation. Tommy will chip in as well, as always. And really, we're going to look at the importance of automation, not just automation itself. Why is it important? What can it help you do and what can it help you achieve? So in terms of the series, we're now coming towards the business end of it, really, as I'd like to call it, the data sciencey, the statistical, the fun part, if you like, automation, doing things quicker, doing things with a bit of code and maybe R, Python or other languages. And we'll get towards statistical techniques, media mix modeling, and some other mathematical concepts as we reach through the rest of the series. So let's just start with a typical scenario of manual reporting. So this is before you even considered automating it. What does the status quo look like in relation to reporting? And if you've worked with marketing data and if you're not particularly savvy with doing it in a quicker, more automated way yet, this might look a little bit familiar to you. And you start with some data. Now that data is probably going to come from your ad platforms, maybe some social platforms, and almost certainly Google Analytics as well. And you've got all of this information. And what do? You download static reports from each of these platforms. So you go and download a static feed from Google Analytics. You'll look at all of your social platforms like Meta. You'll download a feed from there in another spreadsheet, and you'll get all of your Google Ads data in several following spreadsheets as well. And once you've got these 10 sources of data, 20 sources of data, who knows how many spreadsheets you might have, you start to do some work. And what do? You start to try and join the spreadsheets together and you make lookup tables and you put in a load of formulae and you copy information from one sheet to another. And this is the kind of thing that takes you hours upon end to do. But it's not just about the fact that it takes hours, it's the fact that you're putting in a formula. And then when you do the report next week, you might put in another formula. And you might have to reference the lookup table within every spreadsheet that you're looking at. And you might have to do that every week as well. So there's a lot of manual work that you need to do. So it's not just the time, but manual work, as we know, can bring error as well. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So you've got all of these spreadsheets, you've merged them all into one spreadsheet. So this is your storage and processing bit. And then your output sits in another spreadsheet as well. Now, this makes people feel really comfortable. We like spreadsheets. Marketers love a spreadsheet. I think a lot of people love a spreadsheet. And it makes us feel comfortable. We've got an output in a format that we know and that we love and that looks familiar. And this spreadsheet's wonderful because it's got all of the information in. But we spoke about error before. Do we know if the information's right? Can we possibly do it in a quicker way than the 10, 20 hours that we spend putting all of these spreadsheets together? I think the answer to that is, of course, we can.
I think there's a great point there. So first of all, there's the element of the data sources being also siloed and the analysis being siloed. So some people might get all the data and then merge the data. Classic example, Google Analytics data, which is measuring success across your whole marketing mix. But you need to also add things like cost data from like Meta and stuff that doesn't come by default. I mean, you can't import that to Google Ads, Google Analytics. There are processes, but even that needs automation. But the better way, in most ways, if you do want to take your dashboard, your analysis to the next level, is separating it in it could be a spreadsheet, or it could, as we'll talk later, in sort of data warehousing, and then merging it and visualizing it later. But the problem is, I think a lot of people even just stuck at that first point of just looking at each individual data source. And I think, Jeremy, there you also mentioned error. I've actually seen a lot of spreadsheets, and I don't mean to be mean to people who do lookups and sum ifs and all this. There have been errors. They'll go, this doesn't make sense. Why is my cost per acquisition X and it should be this if I calculate it manually? Because they didn't QA it either, and they've been reporting on it badly for months.
Yeah, and I think every analyst has had that horror moment where you've had to fix somebody else's spreadsheet. I know I've been there as well. In fact, at one of the agencies that I worked at, the data team were called the 4 days late and wrong team because every report took so long to create in a spreadsheet before I joined, obviously. And they're always wrong because they are subject to manual error. So if you're an analyst watching this, we'd love to hear about your biggest spreadsheet horror. So add it in the comments below, drop us a DM. We'd love to hear a little bit more. You also touched upon visualization, which I think is really important. Spreadsheets do have charts and visuals that you can build, but in terms of the appeal of them, there's much better ways to visualize data out there, which we'll come to. Before we go there, why is it needed? Well, there's lots of reasons why automation is useful, and I'm going to touch upon four here. So the first one, which we've already spoken about, is really the time. Once you've automated a report, that report can run on a server. You can set it up to run. If you want to run it daily, you can run it at 5 a.m. when we're all nicely tucked up in bed. You can run it once a week on a Monday at 5 a.m. You can run it once a month. However often you need to run it, you can run that on a server using an automation. That means it takes seconds for that report to run, and you're not spending days and days of your time manually putting it together. That means that you get something that's more accurate as well. We spoke about the manual process. If you've got somebody that spends 20 hours a week putting a report together, I guarantee there will be a mistake in that report, because at some point in that 20 hours, they'll get up for the bathroom. They'll get up to make a cup of coffee. They'll get up to go home at the end of the day, because nobody works 20 hours straight. And when you sit down again to pick up where you are, if you can't remember exactly what the last thing you did was, you may make a mistake. That mistake could creep in, and it could stay in there for weeks and weeks, months, years until it's noticed. And that data's wrong, and the subsequent data's wrong as a result. So accuracy is a really important aspect of it, getting data that's accurate, because if you base a decision on inaccurate data, you could be making the wrong decision for your brand, and that can have catastrophic consequences. We spoke about visualization before, better presentations. Spreadsheets do have charts. They're standard, they're okay, they're fine, they do the job. But there are tools out there now, particularly with the evolution of more BI technologies, that can present data in a more visually appealing way, which means it's more easily digested by the key stakeholders, and therefore they make better decisions as a result. And then all of that gives us knowledge. So knowledge is really important. We've spoken about data-driven decision making. If you've got to make a decision, you want to have all of the best knowledge that you can at that time you're making the decision. You want to know how your marketing's performing if it's a marketing decision. You want to know who your customers are if you've got to market them. And if the information's right and you've got all of that at your fingertips in an accurate and very well presented way, it's easier knowledge or to make a decision based on that knowledge. So we know we need it. And what does it look like? How can we break away from the spreadsheet? Well, this is where we want to get to. This is basically the holy grail of an automated workflow. This is the gold standard, if you like. And we start with the same data sources, or we start as we started with from a manual perspective. But what you'll notice here is we don't see a spreadsheet in existence. We might have a spreadsheet somewhere, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you start with all of these manual, if you like, data sources, and you feed them into a data warehouse. Now, we're going to focus on Google BigQuery here. A lot of this series has focused on Google. Obviously, other options are available, Microsoft, Amazon, etc., etc. Tommy, do you want to touch a little bit on the importance of Google BigQuery and why it's so useful for marketing at this point?
Yeah, I mean, before, yeah, I will talk about BigQuery, but I want to say this is not the only way to do it. You could still do it through a Google Sheet, for example, and still automate it and then get it in a Looker Sheet dashboard. There's tools like Supermetrics where it can also go straight to BigQuery, but you can also automate the data downloads, schedule it daily into like a sheet, get a Looker Sheet dashboard. And already that's a step in a better direction, but it's still super limited in many ways. So yeah, for example, the amount of rows of data you can have, like in a spreadsheet, is also limited. So if you want to get loads of historical data, or if you want to get ID level data, good luck with that. You're going to hit your limits of the spreadsheet, so you're not going to get all that lovely data. Also, the dashboards are really clunky and slow, and you're going to spend more time watching the swirls go around as you're loading. So yes, this isn't, I'd say, typical in a sense. This is best practice. You need it in a data warehouse for various reasons: for speed, efficiency, better data engineering capabilities. I guess second to that, and we spoke about it in the series as well, is we can start now with marketing data, and this is why all the marketing tool providers like Google and Google Ads, Google Analytics, Meta have done the same. Google Search Console have done the same. I'm sure soon other like providers like LinkedIn and etc. They're going to follow suit. They're enabling you now to export raw data to BigQuery, right? And that's like going to be it depends on the type of data set, but like Google Analytics, it's ID level data, so you can do your own modeling. It's going to be more accurate. I mean, GA4 UI has had its fair share of issues, but yeah, so you can get more accurate data. You have the control of modeling it, and usually more data. I encourage everyone to start looking into Google BigQuery and look at these raw exports and what it offers and why it's best to get it and start getting it. Because if you don't, you're not going to get that historical data either. Because once you start the connection to export, and we'll only start pushing the data from the day you connected it. So it's best to start ASAP, start collecting that data so you can actually start analyzing it and get that historical data when you're ready to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it's probably a good time now to touch upon SQL, actually. A lot of people think of SQL as, oh, no, I don't need that. That's the tool the database engineer needs. And to an extent, that's true. And I'd say that for any analyst, SQL is kind of the base knowledge that you need. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to be able to pull some information from a table and filter it in a basic way. So basic working knowledge of SQL is always useful, even if you can't code in R or Python. Basic SQL will probably get you a long way, particularly when you're working with marketing data. Why do R and Python help? And obviously, as everyone knows, I'm an R user, and I'm going to talk about them collectively here. They're really good at not just pulling together various data sources, either pulling them through an API or pulling them in through our good old-fashioned spreadsheet sources, but they're very good at cleaning them and putting them in a format that's useful from a reporting perspective. Naturally, once you've got your data into R or Python, you can do a lot more with it. You can start doing some modeling and understanding what might happen next. How could we spend a little bit less on our marketing and still get the same or a better result? And you can start visualizing it, which is where Shiny comes in. So Shiny is your front end visual wrapper for R and more recently Python as well. This is where you can build fully customizable applications that can visualize your data, tell you what's happening, but also can be a lot more powerful than that because you can build your model into there as well. So if you've got a predictive model that tells you how you could spend less, or working up some scenarios where you could spend different levels of money and get different results from them, Shiny's really, really good for that. And it's so cost effective to host in Shiny. Naturally, as you've seen, we're sort of quite political here. We're sort of politician style talking. This isn't the only solution. There are other things out there that are not shiny. We spoke about Looker Studio before. Looker Studio naturally connecting really well as part of the Google suite with tools like BigQuery, with some of the ad platforms and Google Analytics as well. If you're not on the side of Google and you're looking at Microsoft, I feel it's almost become like a term in its own right. Some people don't say dashboard anymore, visual, say, can you build me a Power BI? So Power BI sits out there as another leading tool within the visual space. Power BI, Looker Studio, these can get, depending on how you're using them, a little bit more expensive than Shiny, which is one cost, no matter who's using it, no matter, kind of say no matter how much they're using it, but it's a package base. So there are other tools available, and there are others outside here as well. You probably come across things like Tableau and Click that I know some people are using, and many, many others. So there's lots of ways to visualize your data, but I could almost guarantee to you that whichever solution you take on the right-hand side here, it will be better than what you've got in a spreadsheet, and it will be more dynamic, and it will help you make better decisions.
Luxury is fully free, and I think in a way that can kind of be the cheapest option, but it's also the most limited option as a result of that. So it depends what you want. If you want a really simple dashboard, Looker Studio is probably like your best option. Don't pay for licenses. Don't need to do that. But then Looker Studio, for example, if you've got loads of data, I think I'm not even so sure it has quite a it's not got the greatest limit. Whereas then Power BI, for example, it depending on your license, you can depends how much data you can process. So again, Power BI might be okay if you have one or two cheaper licenses, but you want a bit more customization. But then as soon as you need 10 licenses, and it's like, and you want still good customization and then you also want modeling of data and everything like that. And it's like it's a no-brainer. Go to Shiny at that point.
I'm just going to finish with a quick case study because we've sat here and we've spoken about, okay, get your reports automated, it's quicker, it's faster, it's more accurate, all these kind of things. Here's how you do it. But let's actually see how it's worked in practice. So this is one of our marketing agency examples. And, the agency that we were working with in this particular instance was spending, it was about half an FTE's time, just manually creating weekly reports for various different clients. So all of these reports sit within Excel. So we understood the process, and by understanding the process, what we tend to do is I or somebody in the team will sit there and watch somebody doing the report, watch exactly what they're doing, talk us through it. Cool. We want to watch you copy cells from one spreadsheet to another, write formally, copy them down. And having watched that, we put together a script in the R environment. You could do it in Python as well, as we've said before. And the script was literally, we wrote down the steps that they took, and then we wrote code to replicate each of those steps. And then once we replicated each of those steps, you can set that up to run. You can run it in BigQuery, you can run it in GitHub Actions, which is another tool that we use that you can schedule processes on a regular basis. And the result was the reporting time was reduced from that 15 to 20 hours that I mentioned before, to 2 hours. So we're saying here, an 87% time reduction. But it's a lot more than that. You're not going to get up for a cup of coffee and forget step 15 of 19 that you've been through. You're going to have more accurate data. You've got the power now, the data's in R to model it and visualize from it. So it's so much more than let's just save some time, let's make things more accurate. It's the impact that it can have on the business, on your KPIs, and most importantly, on just getting the most out of everything. So if you're not looking at automation yet, or if you think you could be more automated, now's really the time to get on it. If you want any support, advice, or assistance, you know where we are. Drop us a comment below. Come and have a chat. We're always happy to chat and find out and give you some advice on how you can better automate your reporting. We will be back again soon with another episode of Marketing Data 101, as I say, focusing more on the statistical side. So until then, thank you very much.